Everybody, my name is Mike Mistretta. I'm a professional planner. I work for Harbor Consultants in Cranford, New Jersey. My firm represents the Borough of Kenilworth as the Affordable Housing Planner, and I'm here tonight to give you a brief presentation of the ordinance that was just read into the record, and tonight is the public hearing for that ordinance. I've been asked to put together a little bit of a short PowerPoint to explain essentially why are we doing this project. There's a lot to it, so a lot of different components to it, so I tried to put it into a short PowerPoint. This PowerPoint will also be made available to the public, so you don't have to take notes or you're not missing anything, but I'm told it's going to be either uploaded on the website or there'll be full copies available to the public at the clerk's office, or we'll provide a link to it. So everything I'm presenting tonight is a public document, and it's for anybody in the borough. I'm starting with just why are we doing an affordable housing project, and what is the borough's constitutional obligations. And essentially what we're trying to do tonight is talk about affordable housing, redevelopment, and our redevelopment plan together. So there's three different, say, silos, if you will, that I'm going to touch upon very briefly. But essentially, the township of our borough has a Mount Laurel Doctrine obligation. It generally refers to moderate, low, and very low income housing. And I put that first slide up there just because there's a lot of misconceptions about what affordable housing is. Essentially, affordable housing is moderate income, low income, and very low income households, and requiring that they are included within this project. And every region, every county in New Jersey is broken down or is assigned one of the 6 regions that goes throughout New Jersey. I'm not expecting you to be able to read that slide. I just wanted to highlight that we're in Region 2. And the next slide, I'm just blowing it up a little bit more. This is our region. We're located in Union County in Region 2. And this slide gives you the numbers. You know, I'm just trying to put a face or a light, shine a light, if you will, on what is affordable housing. We're in Union County, we're in Region 2, and as you can see, these are the 2021 affordable housing regional income limits by household. It's issued by the Affordable Housing Professionals of New Jersey. It was recently issued, it just got cut up on the upper right-hand corner there, but you can see these are brand new numbers. They're issued April 27th, 2021. So we're in Region 2. We have this moderate, low, and very low income obligation. And as you can see, the median income level in our region is $107,615. You use that number to do your calculation, as I showed you on the previous slide. Moderate is between 80% and 50%. Low income is less than 50%, greater than 30%, and then very low is 30% or less. So we take those and we apply it to our median household income. And I just highlight I like to start with the family of 4, only because it's in the middle of the chart. You can go up and down depending on how many people are in each one of these units. But as you can see, Union County's in Region 2. It's a very wealthy region. And a family of 4, moderate income, you can make $86,092 and still qualify to live in one of these units. That's pretty substantial. I mean, $86,092 for a moderate income unit. So that is what affordable housing is. Affordable housing is also a mixture of low and very low, and you can see the numbers there, 53 or 32, and it goes up and down depending on how many people are living in each one of the units. So the first thing I want to touch upon is, what are we talking about? This is what we're talking about. It's income limits by household size, and you can see where we are located. A very brief history. I'll just touch upon a couple of our obligations to the Mount Laurel Doctrine. Mount Laurel 1 was issued 1975, major case known as Mount Laurel 1. And then it was supplemented, Mount Laurel 2 in 1983. The major difference is between Mount Laurel 1 and Mount Laurel 2 is, you could argue we didn't have an obligation under Mount Laurel 1. That's kind of why I'm a little bit glossing over it. A lot of people would disagree with me, but I could make the argument that we did not have an obligation under Mount Laurel 1. But in 1983, we do, because what's the major difference in Mount Laurel 2 was, and it's in bold letters up here, is just like the borough of Kenilworth is, even developed municipalities have a constitutional obligation. What does that mean? When you came out with Mount Laurel 1, it was primarily aimed at developing municipalities, such as Mount Laurel at that time. Municipalities that were substantially farm fields, underdeveloped, and had an awful lot of vacant land. That was recognized in Mount Laurel 2 in 1983, where the Supreme Court says, well, even if you're a developed municipality, you have an obligation. That's where the borough of Kenilworth fits in. We are a developed municipality. If you go back to 1983 and you take a look at our borough, we're substantially built out. We don't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres of undeveloped land, as you would find as you go out to the western portion, southern portion of New Jersey. And they put two major caveats in Mount Laurel 2. One is the builder's remedy, where it gives the incentive for the developer to come in with the project to get a higher density project built in the town, generally with a 20% set aside, if you do not comply voluntarily. I should underline those words in the top second sentence there. Municipalities unwilling to comply voluntarily, because this is all a voluntary process, and I should underscore that. So what if you don't comply voluntarily? Well, Mount Laurel 2 gave us the builder's remedy. That allows the developer to come in, go right to court. He does not have to come in this room, doesn't have to come to our borough. He goes right to court, and he files what's called a builder's remedy lawsuit if you're not compliant. Now, what's the incentive for the township, or for the borough? It's called a judgment of repose, which is the protection. That's the security. If you come up with a plan, you satisfy your obligation, you are protected for a period of first 6, but then they changed it to 10 years. So you're protected from those builder's remedy lawsuits. Then out of Mount Laurel 2 came the Fair Housing Act in 1985, which the implementation of that act essentially created Coah, Council on Affordable Housing. Most of you have heard and read about it and so forth. They came out with a set of rules in 1987, another set in 1994. They tried to come up with round 3 rules in 2004, and that's where the fun started, where they were denied and went back and forth between the appellate court, Supreme Court, legislature, and so forth, all the way through 2014. For a 10-year period, it was through this legal process, which was essentially an argument about the round 3 rules and regulations. Until finally, Mount Laurel 4, March 2015, the Supreme Court had enough. It said enough with it. They essentially abolished Coah and said, you're not doing your job. You had 10 years to adopt the round 3 rules, and you didn't. So they said, and I'm summarizing a lot of issues here, but just to get through this, they essentially said, Coah, you're out of business. You're not going to handle this anymore. We're going to give the power now over to the superior courts. The superior courts are going to manage this process, and they gave towns deadlines to prepare plans, file declaratory judgments, and so forth. And they also said round 3 rules are invalid, except for very few sections of round 3. And they said go back and use round 2. Use the round 2 rules. And that's where we are today. And that's where we stand as a borough right now. We're under Mount Laurel 4. The Supreme Court issued this decision March of 2015. So we're 6 years into Mount Laurel 4 right now with this obligation. All right, so what does all this mean to our borough? What's our obligation? Our affordable housing obligation, we have a prior round obligation, which is 1987 to 1999 of 83 units. and we have what's called a gap period. Remember when I spoke about that 2004, 2015, where they validated the round 3 rules and it went back and forth and so forth? That's known as the gap period. There's more to it. I'm just hitting the highlights here. And then there's this present obligation that we have in front of us, which brings us out to 2025. And that obligation is 271. So combined, our total obligation under the Mount Laurel 4 and previous Mount Laurel decisions as issued by the Supreme Court in March of 2015 is 354 units. 354 affordable housing units. Doesn't mean you have to build 354 housing units. I'll get to that in a minute. But that is our constitutional obligation. That point, pretty much we can't argue. And why? It was at the bottom I said, it's derived through a fair share methodology that was approved by Judge Jacobson. They had a very significant trial in Mercer County known as the numbers trial, where all of the numbers experts, and there's only a few, throughout New Jersey came in and they testified and they evaluated the different ways that the numbers were calculated. That numbers trial and that decision issued by Judge Jacobson essentially established what the numbers are for New Jersey, for Union County, for our borough, and that's where these numbers come from. The question is, what do we do with this number of 354? It is our constitutional obligation, and we have to figure out a plan that satisfies that number. Kenilworth, our borough has already adopted ordinances, so we are not new to affordable housing. We have on our ordinances right now today, if you go read them, section 120-35.2, so you can actually start with section 120-35.1, and we have an overlay ordinance for affordable housing. And this is designed to capture affordable housing units as projects are getting developed. The problem is, since this ordinance has been enacted and in place, we don't have any affordable housing units. We haven't collected any via this overlay ordinance. That's a problem. Now, our obligation is 354. Remember I said developed municipality. We don't have all this vacant land. We're not one of these southern or western municipalities that we can just go and rezone hundreds of acres of farmland or woodland and so forth and allow for the construction of these units. So what happens in that case? It's called vacant land analysis. We're a developed municipality, and you're allowed, if you are fully built out like we are, to come up with what's called a realistic development potential. And then you subtract that out of your total obligation. The number that's left is called your unmet need. In this case, it's 354 minus 31. We have this unmet need of 323. What does that mean? Realistic development potential refers to a portion of affordable housing obligation that can realistically be addressed with inclusionary development. That's what we're here for tonight, this inclusionary development. So again, that portion of your RDP, that portion of your obligation can realistically be addressed with inclusionary development. Tonight, I'm presenting a redevelopment plan that is an inclusionary development. It has a mixture of market rate units and affordable housing units, and that's the definition of inclusionary development. So that satisfies, or that goes into, not satisfies, that goes into the RDP, the realistic development potential portion of this plan. And then we have these other units, this unmet need. I'll get to that in a minute. So how do we satisfy this 31? I'm going to present this redevelopment plan to you, and that redevelopment plan has 165 total units. It's on 3.79 plus or minus acres. Again, it's known as Block 183, Lot 9. It has 165 total units in the development. Now, out of those 165, 25 of them are affordable housing units. That's the inclusionary part of the project. Okay, so we have 140 that are market rate units, 25 are affordable units. And think about those 25 when I showed you that slide that had the income levels. That's what it's designed to capture. And then there's certain regulations where you have to break it down under the UHAC rules, Uniform Housing Rules, so you get your proper credits, because you can't put them all to one side, the moderate, or all to one side, the very low. There's a distribution agreement that you have to comply with. So we end up with 9 units that are low income, 12 that are moderate, and 4 that are very low. And by doing that, you get what's called bonus credits. Because we're doing this family rental project, the rules say we get 25% of our GDP. So we're not building units now, we're just getting extra credits. So that's what that 6 is, not a unit. So it's 25 plus 6 is 31. I hope that makes sense. But you get incentives to do rental units, and 25% of your RDP. So 25% in a perfect world of your obligation does not have to be built. It could be a rental bonus, or there's other bonuses that we can come up with. So we are not obligated to build your entire number. There's different incentives built into the laws that if you do this voluntarily and you meet these regulations, 25% can be reduced out of that number, and you can achieve that number through credits. Now, how do we address these other numbers? This other number that we still have, this unmet need. One mechanism is that this court, fair share, and special master will ask us, require us, to put in what's called a mandatory set-aside ordinance. Remember, we're only capturing 31 credits. We have over 300 left. So this mandatory set-aside ordinance is designed to blanket the town and put in a provision that any project that creates 5 or more dwelling units will start to produce affordable housing units as they come on board. That will not be the only mechanism that we have to adopt in order to address our unmet need, but that's a start. That's at least one mechanism that we're going to have to put into place. And if I go back to that slide that shows what's already on the books with the borough tonight, we already have a mandatory set-aside orders. However, what the court and the special master are going to make you adopt is slightly different, but not very different as far as the idea that we have. So we have this affordable housing obligation. We have this inclusionary housing project. So why are we just rezoning the project and getting it over with? Why are we using redevelopment? As you can see, we just go to this slide. It details all the different steps. You've heard, I've been up here before. We've had, council has already adopted a resolution authorizing the planning board to do what's called a preliminary investigation report, a redevelopment study. The planning board has already heard that. That's why item number 1 is checked. The report was prepared by Mr. Kevin O'Brien, who's the planning board planner. He did the preliminary investigation report. There's a public notice. There was a hearing in front of the planning board. The planning board declared it an area in need of redevelopment. And then the governing body supported that designation of area in need of redevelopment. And then the governing body adopted a resolution authorizing the preparation of this redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan was then introduced. I was here that evening, the last meeting. Then it went to the planning board. The planning board had a consistency review. The planning board agreed with the redevelopment plan and adopted its own resolution, 5/14/21, and then sent it back to the council tonight. So there's been this back and forth process, this 8-step process in this redevelopment process to first find that the property is an area in need of redevelopment, and then adopt a redevelopment plan via an ordinance. All 7 of those steps have been concluded in sequence, and what we're trying to do tonight is step 8, which is the final adoption of the redevelopment plan by an ordinance. Remember, it's already introduced, referred to the planning board. The planning board adopted a resolution in support of it, and now it's back in front of the governing body. and should it be approved tonight, then this redevelopment process, all 8 steps would close. Now, that only puts the zoning in place by an ordinance. The gentleman earlier was talking about whether or not there's going to be another public hearing. The answer is absolutely yes. This would only put the inclusionary housing project in order as a right by zoning when you adopt this redevelopment plan. The developer and his development team then has to then start the process with the planning board. We don't control that process. The developer does. We've done what our obligation is, which is to put the zoning in place. The next step is that the developer will file a site plan application. There will be a series of public hearings in front of the planning board, and it goes to its regular site plan application process. But that's separate from this redevelopment process that we're talking about tonight. Tonight concludes that 8-step process of redevelopment. Redevelopment there's a lot of advantages to the township, to the borough, to have a redevelopment plan. Most of them, and I'll go through this series of slides that go through the project, and that'll help me explain it a lot better. But it also, it adds a tremendous amount of flexibility in the zoning. Traditional zoning under the MLUL is very rigid. You have to follow municipal land use law does not let you go outside the box too much. It's very rigid. You provide your permitted uses, your accessory uses, bulk standards, and so forth, but you really can't go too much further beyond that. The MLUL doesn't allow you to do that. Why we use redevelopment, and let me go through this process, and I think it'll explain itself as I go through it.